What do you see happen, and not just in the immediate future, not in the over the next 48 hours, but beyond that? Colonel Spencer, before I bring in Adrian, what do you see happen in Iran now?
I see continued operations, unfortunately, based on those statements and what we've seen the regime do in the last 8 days, despite the crippling, like even you and other analysts acknowledge 40% ballistic missiles gone. Israel is basically controls the skies, can do operations at will, have been rearmed. Iran's retaliation attacks are weaker. I think you're going to see continued operations by Israel destroying military infrastructure, and they broaden it up to both the IRGC headquarters, the besieged, the police, and he's going to continue to miscalculate to the point, hopefully, that he acknowledges that if he continues, the regime would fall. But that's not the goal.
Okay, Adrian, your appreciation remains the same, that Israel's operations will continue to pound symbols of regime in Iran till the time they crumble?
I agree with Colonel Spencer's assessment there, that they're going to continue to hit their target packages, and they've gone through their lists, and they've gone through the IRGC besiege, taken out commanders, taken out individuals that can rebuild any type of nuclear program. So they've taken decisive measures, but they're still mopping up, and there's still there's others. You mentioned undeclared sites possibly. There's other people that I'm sure are targeted that they have not been able to get to yet. Mohsen Rezai. There's a few key individuals around Khamenei that I think they want to eventually isolate him to the point where he feels as though he's got nobody around him, and he needs to come to the table to save his regime, if that's possible at that point.
So the conversation that's happening right now, and Colonel Spencer and Adrian, stay with me for a moment. Our Foreign Affairs Editor Geeta Mohan joins us on the broadcast. Geeta, the conversations that are taking place in Istanbul, do they become infructuous or even more important after the bombing that's taken place, especially at Fordo?
Well, they do become important, although how much of delivery will we see with the process is still questionable. But the responses will become very important, Gaurav, whether it's Turkey or, for that matter, European allies of the United States of America, who were kept out of this entire operation. They would be rather upset. And then also the fact that there was an entire process of conversation that was underway with Iran. So while that process has been rendered almost useless and irrelevant, the reactions that will come from these quarters are going to be very important. Also from the countries of the region, whether it's the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, or for that matter, the reaction that will come from a NATO ally of the United States of America, that's Turkey. So one has to wait and see how these countries are going to react. Also, Gaurav, not to forget one very important factor, they have said they're not going to enter the fray, but things change when investments and when interests are hampered. And that's a reaction from Russia and China. How are Moscow and Beijing going to look at this entire escalation and America entering the war is something we'll have to wait and see, given the ties between the Trump administration and Moscow, or for that matter, even Beijing, are not as bad as they were during the Biden administration.
Interesting point you should mention, but can Russia afford to shift focus from Ukraine right now? But China, and especially, Colonel Spencer, let me come to you first. I'll come to Adrian in just a moment. But China has massive interests in Iran. And would China be feeling either let down, cheated, or in a way beaten at this moment?
With concern, I agree. As of right now, the Iranian and their threats about the Straits of Hormuz are reckless. Right now, the Iranian export, that oil economy, the national level, has not been a target for Israel or the United States. I hope China would join in the diplomatic pressure of the regime out of concerns for stability. Pressure him and the regime to come to the table. They already tried to go to Russia. Russia, despite the security agreement, which wasn't a defense agreement that they signed with Iran last year, that they told Iran no thanks, called President Trump and asked if Putin could mediate, and President Trump said, "Why don't you mediate the Ukraine war, and we'll take care of this."
Oh, absolutely. Adrian, your take on how China and Russia are likely to react, and especially China, in your view?
The question on China is very interesting because during the Biden administration, that's where the Islamic Republic was shipping their oil to. So if there's any country that has an enormous amount of leverage over the Islamic Republic, it is Beijing, because they really filled up their foreign reserves, with which Trump had drained down to roughly $4 billion at the end of his first presidency. So China has enormous leverage, as Colonel Spencer said. That movement hasn't been targeted yet. And if China was serious about this, they could force Khamenei to the table on this. The strategic, I think the alliance with Russia, I think that's kind of going to go the way of the relationship that they had with Assad. I think they're kind of done.
They're kind of done. Interesting.